There's an old saying, don't judge a book by its cover. But honestly, that's how I decide what games to review a lot of times. That's all I have, honestly, is its cover. Maybe a little bit with the blurb and some other opinions that come in from the game, but that's really about it. Well, that's what I thought, until I encountered a different caveat. And that is when a review code goes live. I don't know why, but this tends to send alarm bells ringing for me when I look back at games like Cyberpunk 2077 or the more recent release of Sports Story. None of these really had accessible review codes, and then when the game launched, it was sort of a way for, I think, the publisher to beat the reviews into the hands of the consumers. And that's what we saw, is a lot of consumers getting it before a reviewer does. So when that sort of situation happens, I do get my spider senses tingling. And with UnderDungeon, this has been the first time I've seen an indie game do this. So I was even more perplexed on what kind of game we're going to be getting. Well, I'm happy to report that I was completely wrong. This game took me by surprise, and it took me by surprise in a way that I didn't expect, because it isn't the typical game that I thought it would be. And again, this is why we don't judge by cover, but it is very basic in its graphics and its pixel art, but what it provides is something truly remarkable. Most of that comes from its writing. See, in UnderDungeon, you play as a delivery man. It's almost in a sort of mock Amazon style, where you deliver everything to anywhere, and you're met with certain challenges every time you reach someplace. And as the title suggests, these are the dungeons. Now, you are accompanied by your friend Max, who is a little bit of a tutorial guide for you at the beginning, and then that's really it. Although Max is a great companion, unlike somebody like Navi who's constantly telling you where to go or just bugging you about pointless things. No, Max will just offer a lot of banter and some decent humor just to kind of bounce back and forth to keep the game lively. And you play as Kimoto, a cat who has the ability to hold things like swords and mops and things of that nature. Now, every time you go on these delivery requests, you're met with a different issue, and that could be from serving a farmer who has a problem with insects using AI to try to starve humanity, to trying to give a sword to an adventurer named Lank in the middle of a fortress that's surrounded by skeletons and other deadly creatures. Now, throughout all of this, though, Kimoto is the perfect protagonist in my opinion, as he plays a guy who will do what is required of him and does what's requested, but he's going to give you some attitude. He's going to not be happy. As aside from the many different weapons he gets, his other main weapon is sarcasm. And the writing really plays into this, and I think that's one thing that the game definitely excels at more than a lot of other indie games, is just this game has amazing writing and phenomenal humor that you don't really find in a lot of games, but what it does do is it allows you this access into this world that maybe the graphics and visuals don't really do a great job of welcoming you into. They play off of that by having this phenomenal writing style that really allows you to know the personality of the characters in the game. Now, as for gameplay, this game plays a lot like a Zelda-like, as this game has you collect different weapons from a sword to a spinning axe to even a hookshot, and all of these weapons have their own special ability that can be accessed by hitting the X button. Now, this isn't unlimited, but you are allowed about 4 or 5 before you have to refill your gauge. But for the most part, this game does play like a classic Zelda-like. I kind of thought it might borrow from a game like Undertale, and as where it does make reference to it at times, and a reference to even Zelda-likes and even Final Fantasy to an extent, there are things that they borrow from, but for the most part, it's an action-adventure game, which in some ways can be incredibly forgiving, and then in other ways not so much. You see, when you die, you are met with death. Now, Death is another one of my favorite characters in this game, because every time you see him, he has something more to say. He adds on different things about winning Employee of the Year, things of that nature, which is just hilarious to hear from him, and talk about going on dates. But here's the bad thing. Every time you die, he'll either ask you to sign a contract, which in this contract, he can just pull you from the living world at any point to recover an item for him, or you can pay him half of the money you collected on your run. Now, personally, I went with just paying him half the money, because honestly, I didn't find a lot to spend my money on, and typically before you got to the more difficult parts of a dungeon, you could find a shop where you could spend a lot of your money so that when you died, you weren't giving him as much. But the nice thing about that is he respawns you basically where you died, or very, very close to, and all the enemies that you had already beaten have stayed dead, at least for a time. Because you see, this game doesn't just have the enemies die and stay dead, they will respawn over time, but that happens in any way. If you die, live, whatever, you'll notice as you come back to certain parts of the dungeon, the enemies are back alive. But none of them really are that difficult, so it's really not a problem. It's more of a headache if you're trying to navigate a dungeon. And as a true Zelda-like game, it does have puzzles in it. Most are simplistic, but there are a few that can be a little bit difficult to figure out, and that typically is when you run into enemies that have respawned and just really makes you angry, but it's really not that big of a deal. Now, as far as graphics, now for me, this is a part that I think could maybe make it or break it for some people, because the graphics are very simplistic. Like, this is a Game Boy type graphics. Pixel art is detailed enough for you to know what's going on and for you to be able to appreciate the personalities that are in the game, but they're not so detailed as to really allow for this total immersion. It plays off pretty well, and throughout the game doesn't have any visual stuttering or any performance issues, but note that it is incredibly simplistic. Although immersion can be achieved more classically through the writing and the music. This game has an incredible soundtrack that just plays really well into the game. It matches the whole vibe of the game, giving you a little bit of intensity, but also being very playful on the other side of it. And it does, again, call back to a classic like Game Boy style, but with a little touch of modern influence in there to really make it just a little bit more fun and to add more depth into this game. Now, there is a few places that I think this game could improve on. Personally, performance, things of that nature, this game runs great, never had a crash happen, nothing like that. I will say that I noticed on Steam, they had color that you could add into the game, or at least was already added to the game. And I don't know if somebody maybe made a mod or what it was. It didn't seem like it as I watched someone do just a quick little gameplay of this game on PC. And I think that that would help this a ton in the Switch, because just the black and white two-tone colors doesn't really add a lot, and it kind of leaves you questioning sometimes what certain things are, as where if you would add that color to it, that would really help make the game pop and make certain details really stand out to you. Aside from that though, I can't really think of much more that I would add to this game. Well, this game is about a 5 to 8 hour gameplay. Depends on how much you get lost and how long it takes you to do puzzles or even fight certain bosses, with a very minimal amount of difficulty, enough to keep it challenging, but not enough to really frustrate you or cause you to rage quit, something of that nature. Ultimately, I definitely recommend the game, especially right now because it's on sale for $1.99. And I would pick this up way before it goes back off sale, which then it'll be, I think, $12.99, which is still a good deal for this game. Honestly, a regular price is a great price for it because there is a lot of content, it's got a lot of character, a lot of personality, a lot of what we love in video games. But why do that when you could pick it up for $2 right now, which seems like a much better idea. But I absolutely love this game, and I'm glad that it turned out to be this way instead of being the other way, because I hate giving negative reviews, and this is definitely not one of them. This game, for me, is about an 8 out of 10, which is incredibly high. I think the only thing that could be fixed, honestly, is the visuals, and even that, I don't think is as much of a problem to me as it is to some people, but if you added that color in, this game quickly becomes a 9 out of 10. But that's just my thoughts on the game. I'm curious, are you guys picking it up? Have you heard of this game? Is it something that you're interested in, or did you already pick it up? Any and all comments down below I appreciate. I love interacting with you guys, and let me know what games that you're interested in this week, or what games you've already picked up that you've been playing. Anyway guys, like always, I'm wishing you health, wealth, and above all, I hope you're truly happy because you make me happy. Take care everyone. Bye-bye.